You open it, Doris.
All right.
The winner is?
And the winner is...
And the Oscar goes to...
The Oscar goes to...
And the Oscar goes to...
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Academy Governors Kate Amend and Roger Ross Williams.
Okay,
I hope everyone's seated.
I think they are. I think it's okay. Good evening, and welcome to our Oscar event honoring the nominated films in the documentary short and the documentary feature categories. Our fellow Governor, Rory Kennedy, is on location, and she can't be here tonight, but she wants the filmmakers to know that she loves each and every one of your films, and she said, "Your nominations make me proud to be a documentary filmmaker." And I second that. I think, congratulations. And thank all of you for being here tonight to honor these extraordinary films and filmmakers. This year we're celebrating the 90th anniversary of the Academy Awards. But in the early years of the Oscars, there weren't awards for documentaries. Occasionally some nonfiction films did win in the short subject category, but it wasn't until the 14th Academy Awards in 1942 that for the first time the Academy gave special honorary awards to 3 feature documentaries: Churchill's Island, Target for Tonight, and Kukan. So actually, this is the 76th anniversary of the Oscars for documentaries. However, these films only received certificates rather than Oscar statuettes. But Kukan was not only the first American documentary to be so recognized, it was also the first co-produced by a woman, the Chinese-American filmmaker and actress Li Ling Ai. However, for some reason, she was listed in the credits as technical advisor. And the film was lost for decades. But there are some elements that have been found. And this fascinating story has been told it's the subject of a recent documentary, Finding Kukan, which I highly recommend if you can see it. But then in the early years, from then on, the Best Documentary became an official Oscar-nominated category. And in those early years, the Oscar-winning documentaries seemed largely focused on World War II and were produced by mostly government institutions such as the U.S. Army Signal Corps, the British Ministry of Information, and so forth. But that was then. Today, our art form knows no bounds. And we're here tonight to celebrate that by talking about the powerful films that have been created by our stellar nominated filmmakers.
So, so we actually have come a long way since 1941. Today, documentaries, they challenge governments. They don't support them. We change lives, we change perceptions. We give voice to those whose society look past. We're constantly changing the perception of what a documentary is. We continue to break barriers as a community by supporting and encouraging women filmmakers and filmmakers of color. The films nominated today do all these things, often at great personal risk and little financial gain. Our shorts take on big subjects. The opioid crisis in America, mass incarceration, driving while black in this country. I know that personally. Art and mental illness, elder abuse. Our features illustrate a huge range of what a documentary can be. A David and Goliath tale that shines the spotlight on the hypocrisy of the financial banking system in America. Brave heroes who pull life from the rubble in one of the most brutally bombed places on earth. The unfolding of widespread doping and corruption schemes in Russia. A deeply personal story of injustice and systematic racism. And an exuberant love letter to the influence of images by giving power through the stunning portraits of everyday people. Together, these nominated films tell a bigger story of how connected we are becoming as a community. In the doc world, Oscar is not so white. I am, not anymore. We still have lots of work to do, but I can report here today that we are the most diverse branch in the Academy. Thanks. Tonight, we have our first transgender nominee in Yancey Ford. I know where you are, Yancey. We have our first Syrian nominee in Faris Farad. And we have a long overdue nomination from documentary legend Steve James. So, you know, I look forward to the day when we won't have to have firsts or seconds or thirds, where eventually it will become completely unremarkable to have people of color or different types of stories. I want to thank all the filmmakers here today who've worked so hard to tell their stories and tell their truths. And I want to congratulate everyone on their nomination. Thank you.
So we're going to start our program by looking at some scenes from the shorts nominees.
Edith plus Eddie. Laura Checkaway, director-producer. Thomas Lee Wright, producer.
Beautiful. Beautiful place.
Uh-huh. Here comes a bird.
Hmm? Here come what?
Yeah, he's taking off. Going north, I guess.
Like to be thankful
Yeah.
for it, you know, be able to see and see what's out.
Yeah, another house over there.
Yes.
Well, it might be anything at nighttime that kind of worries you.
That's what?
And anything in the dark.
Well, put it this way, I'm so thankful to live in this world. When we came here, now we've been here a long time, and we don't know how much longer that we have.
That's
So
right.
I say we should live
Maybe
and do the best we
worry
can.
about falling in the water.
And love is one of the best
What
things.
about
that
people coming
that love,
on the property
love
when you're not here?
love everybody, treat everybody right. Just one thing, treat everybody right. If you see somebody that need help, help them.
We have to honor each other. And I come here today to honor the oldest cousin in our family. And I'd like for the daughter, Rebecca, please bring them down front here so that everyone can see the newlyweds, Eddie and Edith. I say, praise the Lord. Let's sing some more. You know, people are always doing things to try to break up a marriage or hinder a marriage, and they got married. God honors marriages. And we're honoring this one here today. So we thank God for this beautiful couple. Let's stand, everybody, and give them a good clap. Edith and Eddie. And we want to thank God for Rebecca, her children, her grandchildren, everybody.
What did I love about Edith? Well, she was kind and considerate in talking to me. Not the color of the skin, but the heart. That's what we decided. Well, the heart is red, I believe.
She needed him and he needed her. So God made her and me him. And he put them together.
We went to Reverend Cole while we had been going to church, and he married her. And they tried to say it's not legal. They think they'll wear us down, but they're not going to wear us down. Right. We married for life.
I was called by my lawyer and told that my sister may come and pick them up. I said, we can't separate her from Eddie. Eddie does not want to go to Florida.
He's never been on a plane, and he's saying that right now isn't the time for him to try it.
Now they don't want to take Eddie, and my sister has told me many times that her husband is abusive, abusive, abusive. I think the objective is to move Mom, separate Mom and Eddie and me, and sell the house or rent the house and put them into an institutional situation, to institutionalize them.
I decided you put it in God's hands, and
Heaven is a traffic jam on the 405. Frank Stifel, director-producer.
Not doing too well. I'm not remembering things in order. For the last couple of months, I've been having some pretty bad problems. I wasn't feeling too well on my old medication, and we topped that medication, which really made things even worse. And I don't want to go back on it, but I've been through several different medications and with all kinds of side effects, and I was having some hallucinations. I would wake up in the morning and I would just hear all the towns of the city screaming in my ears. I would hear airplanes, children screaming, honking horns, and terrible things happening to people. And I would see people stuck in pale green glass. And I really thought it was real. This is a really hard and depressing, trying time, but it's really not nearly as bad as times I've had before. And where I've ended up in the hospital and suicidal times ago. I was 7 and that's when I completely fell apart and had no speech at all, not any ability to write or think words. I just started to lose control of my body. I had had a nervous breakdown, and I was hospitalized in a mental hospital. The doctor there said, "Don't worry, we will find the rock in your head." So I was terrified because I thought that there was some gigantic tumor going on in my brain. I really had a lot of trouble finding words. If I saw a chair, I knew what it was, but I didn't know the name for it. My friends made a list of words for me, and I could point to the words. And then it evolved into cutting up the words. And then eventually I built a box inside of an old slide box. Some were descriptive words. Some were swear words, which were necessary. And then some were just abstract ideas. I was very prolific with my drawing, and I think that I was telling more complete stories, maybe because I so desperately was trying to communicate. I didn't on and off able to speak for approximately 10 times around the sun. In 1994, I was given shock treatments. I was extremely suicidal, and the medication wasn't working. Nothing seemed to be helping, and I understood that could be an option, and I begged my doctors to please try that.
Heroin, Elaine McMillian Sheldon, director-producer, Karen Sheldon, producer.
When you take an opiate, it attaches to certain receptors in the brain, and it basically suppresses your respiratory system, and you stop breathing. Naloxone actually knocks the opiate off that receptor, so they start breathing again. They wake up immediately. You are the bone diggity.
I know it.
You're gonna save lives, you know that?
Yeah.
It's a moral obligation to me. I'm an old medic, I'm a nurse, I'm a firefighter. I'm built to help people. first responders in general don't treat those suffering from addiction well. They haven't in the past, and we're trying to change that here in Huntington. Well, look at there. There's my Prince Charming. Here is our naloxone policy. It's the city policy, so use your best judgment whether you need to use it or wait for EMS and just bag. And that's how the policy's written. It says you can. So
we're under no obligation or requirement to administer it?
You are not. You are under obligation to provide BLS, which is basic life support, which is providing rescue breaths. If you get notification that EMS is going to be a while, I'd go ahead and use it. You know, so there's days
no
when they're all tied up.
contraindications of it.
There's no contraindications
But we're not
whatsoever.
required to administer.
Right. 1 box per truck. There's 2 doses in there.
So you're the naloxone dealer.
I am. Number 3 goes on engine 2, and number 4 goes, just put it in the medic bag.
Okay.
Okay? And there's plenty, the health department has plenty, so, you know, if you want to use it, feel free to go ahead. 2 boxes of naloxone, new naloxone protocol. Anytime you have a save, let me know immediately. Put it in the run, give me the run number, any data that I can use.
Bye-bye.
Major 1 responding.
I'm not really sure what a plateau is going to look like. You know, I see this as a countrywide problem that has the potential to bankrupt the country. You know, we conservatively estimated that Cabell County, and we're talking 96,000 people, spent probably about $100 million in health care costs associated with IV drug use in 2015. That's one small county and one small state. I can't even fathom what it's going to look like when it plateaus. But I know it will be welcomed.
Yes, ma'am. This was an overdose. We're clear returning.
Copy 1.
Knife Skills. Thomas Lennon, director-producer.
Because what Escoffier said was, you have these 5 mother sauces, and from those sauces you can make any other sauce, okay? We just talked about the base of it is white stock.
All my fondest memories are around the dinner table.
Your base is milk.
And I mean, that's what me and my mom did together.
Your next mother sauce is tomato. Like, the classic recipe is usually just like you sweat, maybe some onions and garlic.
Heroin took over my whole entire life, my whole entire being.
Really thickened just by reduction. No, I think I went back and looked at Escoffier.
I've been to prison once and in and out of county countless times, and I'd go to sleep and pray not to wake up. I'd be so mad, so mad, so mad to be alive.
Right there, my apartment building. First floor, knock right on the window. Get a nickel bag. I didn't think about at 14 and 15 and 16 that I would amass be a drug dealer and be the scourge of society and bring down homes and happy families and people. Who plans to do something like that? It just was something to do. And then it was something that I did. And then it was something that I became good at. It's a tangle web we weave when once we practice to deceive. Yes, sir. That is so true. My official title was the Poissier. And the way that I remember it is spelled as if it's Poseidon, the fish guy. I would have never imagined to wrap fish with potatoes.
I mean, you can use the other spoon to balance it.
Okay.
Okay.
You have fish and French fries together, but to encrust a fish with potatoes, it just blows my mind even thinking about it right now.
To wrap ratatouille, onion, tomatoes, what else? Zucchini, yellow squash, olive oil. Sauce poivrade, that's wrong, you misunderstood. Red currant. What kind of cheese we use for the ditalini pasta?
The Fontana,
and
a veg.
And vacherin.
Vacherin.
Okay.
They have to cook well, and I'm going to teach them to cook well, okay?
What kind of cheese we use for the salad number 2?
Fontana.
Fried goat cheese.
The fried goat cheese?
Goat cheese. Fried goat cheese, that's correct. What kind of vinaigrette we use?
Red wine. No,
champagne.
Champagne vinegar.
Yes. What else? Shallots. Control your blade, control your turn. It's a turn motions. Turn motions. That's a whole salmon, okay? It's fresh because the gills are red. Take a look. That's a little better. Yeah, that's a little better. Now we're talking, all right? Try to make it like a football.
Basil, garlic, tomato. No, tomato.
Olive oil.
Olive oil.
Okay. That's how you want it, like this. You put your mirepoix. That's a lot, but that's okay. On $50, how much you can use in dollars?
How much can you use in dollars?
Yes. Take off the rib cage. Et voilà.
Traffic Stop. Kate Davis, director. David Heilbrunner, producer.
We're not helping anybody. All that stuff.
Man, take a seat back in the car, please. Take a seat back in your vehicle, please. Okay, man, we're being pulled over right now, so I need you to take a seat back in the car.
Are you serious?
Yes, ma'am, I'm not joking. This is your driver's license. You're being stopped for speeding.
When I'm already stopped, so technically can you stop me? Because you didn't pull me over because I'm parked.
You only talk, ma'am, you were about to go inside without a wallet, so I know you're only coming here because you know I was coming to pull you over.
Mm-hmm.
I can ask them to stop you if you've already parked, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, let me see your driver's license.
Mm-hmm.
All right, take a seat back in your car so we can close the door. Put your feet back in the car so I can close the door.
Please hurry up.
Okay, ma'am, stand up for me, okay?
Okay.
No.
No, why are you touching me?
Stop resisting.
Oh my God!
Stop resisting.
Oh my God!
Stop resisting.
Stop
resisting.
What is it?
Stop resisting right now. Get out of the car.
I'm getting out. Let me get out. Do not touch me. Do not touch me.
Get out of the car now.
Ow! Oh my God!
8 minutes. I was pulled over by an officer. I was asked to get back in my car. I complied. I did what he asked me to do. And I was sitting in my car. And I'm just like, oh my God. I don't know why, but I don't trust you. Now I do know why. I did not trust him.
Okay, can the filmmakers please come up? And and you have assigned seats. Oh, that's why I love documentaries. Every one of those films is just so powerful. Why don't we just go down, everybody introduce yourself so you'll know who's who and who's with which film.
Tom Wright, producer, Edith and Eddie.
Laura Checkaway, director, producer, Edith and Eddie.
Frank Stifle, Heaven is a Traffic Jam on 405.
Elaine McMillian Sheldon, director, producer, Heroin.
Curran Sheldon, producer and director of photography of Heroin.
Thomas Lennon, Knife Skills.
Kate Davis, director, Traffic Stop.
David Heilbrenner, producer, Traffic Stop.
Thank you. You know, I feel such a personal connection to all the people in your films. You know, you bring them, I don't know, there's an intimacy, there's a connection that just jumps off the screen. And I once heard Al Maisel say, I'm paraphrasing, but he said something to the effect, we make documentaries to make new friends. And I just wonder if that resonates for you all, and you would just have everybody address that question. Want to start?
Well, personally experiencing the company of all these filmmakers has been a really gratifying thing because we have a lot of respect, I think, and collegiality in this category, and very grateful to have made the acquaintance of these really fine filmmakers.
Yeah, and absolutely. I agree with Al, and I just feel so enriched by getting to know Edith and Eddie and their loved ones, and I feel like you know, each film that I've made so far, I sort of walk in one person and walk out a much deeper, richer person. So absolutely.
I speak to Mindy more often than I speak to my kids. Beej or I speak to her every day. And I think, you know, I mean, there are people who do this well. I'm not one of them. I need to fall in love with the people that I'm making a film about. I can't sort of operate on cynicism. And so it is an act of love, and it is an act of friendship and community.
Yeah, the three women in our film, I mean, the thing about any documentary, making any documentary, I don't necessarily have to agree with the people I'm filming. I don't have to be their best friend, but I certainly respect their point of view. And luckily, these three women are just awesome women, and as well as people on the ground doing incredible things. So I am happy to call them friends in a very special way.
Yeah, and I would just add to that. I mean, we make documentaries to make new friends, but we also make documentaries to learn from the people that we interact with. Everyone here up on the stage, everyone who makes documentaries, but also the 3 women in our film, I believe has made me, knowing them has made me a more compassionate and kinder and nicer human being, hopefully. And it's just nice to learn that through the process of creating film.
I think I half agree with Al Mazos, which is to say that there is an incredible intimacy that happens when you connect with a documentary subject, and you have to, on some level, I think, fall in love with them. And also then the process of getting a story, I find, creates a kind of strange countertransference where I'm like loving the person, whether I might or might not. In regular life, I am in that work. But at the same time, we're professionals, and I don't presume to speak for Frank, because he and I have had that argument before, in the sense of, for him, friendship and filmmaking are one and the same. For me, friendship is part of filmmaking, but then there's also this tricky moment where my priority becomes not the friendship, but the film. And in that process, I can feel myself distancing myself and prioritizing something else. There's a famous sentence by Janet Malcolm where she said, every act of journalism is an act of betrayal. And I think that's an overstatement, but there is a process of separation, and that becomes very tricky because you really love that person, but you love your film more than you love that person. And so and sometimes that gets you into complicated ethical territory. I'm not speaking personally, of course. I've never committed anything.
No.
Of course not. I'm talking about other people. Yeah.
Well, I mean, every film is different, and sometimes the issues, to me, drive the relationship more than the relationship, and sometimes not. With Traffic Stop, I feel like it was one of those rare films of the bunch that I've done where I really just felt inspired by our subject, and her courage to stand up to the cops and later on question them. And it wasn't easy for her to be in the film at all, because she had suffered from PTSD so much. And so in a way, I feel like I lived through, although we're friends, I think something deeper is going on that involves me feeling really humbled in her presence. And that gets back to the learning, really truly learning from people who are facing crises and trauma and hardships that I have not myself.
And it's like friendship, the relationship you develop with your subjects, but it's maybe a little bit more complicated because it is sort of a one-sided relationship. It's that transference thing. You're saying, tell me more about yourself, tell me more. Oh, that's fascinating. And by the time the interview is done, they may be crying and they really care about you, but they really don't know you. And it's a very strange experience. At the best of times, you do become friends, and it has happened. But it doesn't happen every time. Certainly not why I went into filmmaking. Yeah. But it was a great fringe benefit when it works out. And it did with Traffic Stop, Katie. I agree. That was a fantastic experience, and one I treasure.
Great, thank you. Well, let's talk about Edith and Eddie. So the film starts out so fun. They're dancing, they're exercising, they're doing their morning routine. I mean, at what point, is that the film that you started out to make, and what point did it take a turn?
Yeah, it is. I set out to make a film about newlyweds who had gotten married at age 95 and 96, and just wanted to know what it would be like to find love at that time in your life. So I thought it would be a short portrait, much like what you see in the first several minutes of the film, of just them enjoying their time together and going to church and having a new reason to wake up in the morning. And then we find out that there's a disagreement among Edith's daughters about what's best for their mom. And so it takes a really sharp turn into, something completely unexpected when the couple's in danger of being torn apart.
And you must have been so angry and frustrated at the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, there was, I think that, you know, you set out on this adventure as a filmmaker to just, if you're following people's lives in real time, then you don't know what twists and turns are going to come. And so we do just try to stay centered in that and the work that we're there to do. And at the same time, our hearts are really bleeding and still bleeding. Yeah.
Thomas, I know that you edited a book, The Family Guide to Preventing Elder Abuse. Would you talk a little bit about that issue, and like, are you using this film as outreach or?
Sure, yes. We really hope that this film has life beyond the present moment, and this issue is such an important and emergent one. I had just lost my father prior to meeting Laura, and saw the initial footage that she had shot and was very, very moved for very personal reasons. And just knew that there was a reason that we had met, and then we've been doing this for the last couple of years together. And so that book was being edited. I had several experts on the subject contribute chapters, and so there is an educative element to this. But it all begins with the Edith and Eddie themselves and their way of expressing their need for autonomy, their way of expressing love for one another. And we both felt very strongly that we had to preserve their dignity in the telling of the story, and that was one of their strongest messages.
Yes. And you did. Yeah, you really, it's heartbreaking, but it's so powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Frank.
Yes.
Well, Mindy is compelling from the moment we see her and her art. And did you know about her art first, or how were you introduced to Mindy?
My wife is an artist and works in that same studio. And so my first introduction was BJ coming home and talking about this woman who makes this incredible art in the back of the studio and doesn't speak to anybody. And over time, they would have coffee at the end of the day. And I think there was a group show, and I saw the work for the first time and just was astounded. And then we found ourselves sort of at art shows together, and I was curious. I mean, there's not 1 minute of that film that I knew about. There's nothing. I knew nothing about her illnesses. I knew nothing about her family. By the way, anybody want to meet Mindy? She's right over there.
Here? Oh, great.
So I just became curious. I didn't know, I just wanted to know where that art came from. Why was she the way she was? And it was, I had no clue as to what that story was, and didn't for the longest time. And so I just described this to a student the other day. I said, it's religion. There's no evidence that there's a film there. But you keep on, but you just keep on showing up.
In fact, probably a good bit of evidence that there isn't.
You just keep on showing up as if there might be. And so, a story emerged, but it took a long, long time.
It did?
Yeah.
But clearly she trusted you and was open to you.
Yeah, there were 6 interviews with Mindy, and the interviews got deeper and deeper and deeper. There were 3 interviews with her mother that also got deeper. And then, it just, I interviewed everybody in that studio, never used any of that footage. The ratio of footage used to footage shot is just ridiculous. And that's what happens when you don't, when you don't really know where the film is, and the film will come together at some point. I made a film earlier than that where I knew exactly what the film was. So this was just a matter of just showing up and believing that there was a cogent story that would come together.
Yeah. And her art is so powerful. Yeah. It's wonderful. Thank you. Elaine and Kevin. You know, your film, we only saw one of your subjects. There are 3 strong women. Did you set out to feature women only, or was it more just to look at the problem of opiate addiction and activism?
Yeah, we live like 40 minutes away from Huntington in Charleston, West Virginia, so we were looking for a story about the solutions that were happening on the ground. It's a story that's, one that's been haunting us for a while as journalists and documentarians living in the state. I've had a lot of classmates, too many familiar obituaries and mugshots, so to say that. And so we were just looking for, what are people doing? What is happening? And it turned out that these 3 women were really the standouts. We started by interviewing the mayor's drug control policy board, and once we interviewed Jan Rader on that, it kind of we stopped on the board. And Jan took us in a fire truck for the first several days and introduced us to all of her friends. We jokingly called this film Jan and Her Friends for a while. And Jan was very easy to warm up to. She's a person that'll hug you the first time she meets you. And but the other 2 women, it really took a lot of relationship building. What they do is working with populations that they don't want to exploit and reveal in any way that's harmful. And so I wouldn't say we necessarily set out to document women, but the women who were the people we were drawn to, what they were doing on the ground. There's certainly men on the ground doing great things too.
Yeah, but hence the title.
Well, and the Center for Investigative Reporting, through their Glassbreaker initiative, was funding short films about women making change. And so we had shot this footage and really had no place for it and had no funding for it. And that call out came about 6 months after we had shot some of the preliminary footage, and we were able to find the first round of funding through them.
That's great. And Huntington, what is it? It's the overdose capital of America? Is that what?
Well, so that's sort of like the problem, is it's called the overdose capital of America, but the media has treated Huntington, it's like an abusive partner relationship. I mean, people have been dropping into Huntington because they've been so transparent about their overdose numbers. They have an app that has live data. They've been so transparent to try to get help because they have no resources. But in turn, a lot of media has come in and said some really potentially non-true things, but the overdose rate is 10 times the national average, so it could be easily called the overdose capital.
Right. So you've been personally affected then, you say,
Yeah, I mean, friends from high school and middle school. Yeah, I grew up we're both from West Virginia, we grew up in different parts of the state, but the part that I grew up in is essentially just coal mining communities, and those communities, small pharmacies were flooded with, Kermit, West Virginia got 9 million pills over 2 years to one pharmacy, and it's a town of 372.
Jeez.
So that was sort of the backdrop of my growing up. And now it's heroin and fentanyl and carfentanyl.
Yeah. And Kevin, you're the cinematographer?
And producer, yeah.
And producer, right. And so talk about going on those ride-alongs.
Yeah, well, we didn't really want to do it, to be honest. I think, Elaine and I both wanted to show a story of hope, a story of inspiration, and, a lot of the media that comes into Huntington is very focused on sort of the user, sort of the glorification of drug usage in a way. And so we really wanted to focus on these 3 women who are making change and, helping those in need. But at the same time, we knew we had to show the issue in order to get across the point of what they're facing and sort of what they need to overcome. In a lot of ways, I mean, it's a pretty terrible experience in a lot of ways, because your first goal is just not get in the way. these are first responders doing their job, and they're saving a life. And so it's, make sure that your light, it's just the two of us, one camera kind of hunkered down into your shoulder, and you just try to stay out of the way. But I mean, you're seeing someone who's potentially at the lowest part of their life, and if the EMS gets there 3 minutes later, that they're probably going to die. So you're seeing someone on that verge, and then sort of snap out of it, and it's a pretty harrowing experience in a lot of ways. But we just sort of focused on the women, focused on Jan, focused on the first responders doing their job, and they sort of give you that uplift to kind of live in that situation.
Well, it's very powerful to be that close, but it also, to me, speaks to the idea that one person can make a difference, and that these women are definitely.
Yeah, I mean, Jan's the first female fire chief in West Virginia, so she has a position to get up every morning and serve her community. And the judge, Patricia Keller, is the drug court judge, family court judge. But Nisha Freeman, the third one, is she's a single mom real estate agent who has taken upon herself to help women working in the sex trade for their drug addiction. And so she's everyone in this room. She is a person that has found the time, made the time, and the love to help people suffering in her community. So she's, in many ways, I think, a great example of, people always feel when a problem's so large, they feel like they have no control over it, and they often just run away from it. But all three of these women go right towards it, and they all show that you can have impact.
Yes, definitely. So thank you. Well, Thomas, Knife Skills is such an incredible and beautiful film. The food is fantastic looking, but it's all beautifully shot. And you shot it, right?
I shot it, yes.
Yeah,
and took sound and
everything.
just it was it's no way to make a film, but just the way I did it.
Well, I don't know if I just think the premise of this restaurant is so preposterous, and we didn't see Brandon.
Who's the founder of the restaurant?
Yeah.
Right.
So maybe you could just tell, in case people haven't seen the film, what the premise is.
This is a person I met completely by chance. I did not have any background in criminal justice. I didn't have a position staked out on any of these issues. I was just your average newspaper reader in terms of that stuff. But I met this odd guy in his 30s. Very intense, had a pretty gold-plated resume as a restaurateur, had worked at Trotter's in Chicago, which is kind of the premier restaurant in Chicago, had worked at Chanterelle, which was one of the top 4 or 5 restaurants in New York, and he'd also, even though he did not speak a word of French, he'd somehow managed to spend 6 months working in a French restaurant. God knows how that worked. But anyway, he had brushes with the law as a young man, and he had just decided that this was something he was going to do. The thing he knew how to do was run restaurants, and he was going to run a restaurant in almost everyone, but with the exception of 2 people in the restaurant were all people who were recently released from prison, most of whom had no cooking experience at all. And my good fortune was that I got to meet him just when he was signing the lease and getting ready to do this. And we met over a meal, a mutual friend, and I knew before we'd finished the first course that this was a film, and so started coming out there. And like you, I had to stay out of the way. The stakes were not as high, but the pots are very hot, and the kitchen was very small, and so I just started hanging out, and I think that I don't think ignorance is ever a virtue in making a film, but I do think the fact that I didn't really come to it with any background, with no message, no preconception, I think that was kind of an asset, because I just hung out and watched, and then sort of went through certain stages of education that I think the average person would go through. My first thought when I went out there is like, God, there's going to have these guys with lots of tattoos and bulging muscles, and and that was essentially completely wrong. And so I sort of had to work my way through that. And then I came to be so attached to these folks that it was just like, well, gosh, all they needed was a second chance. Isn't this great? Isn't this peachy? And then one after another, the people I was following started getting into trouble. And then I started reading, and then I understood that that's in fact the road to recovery is a bumpy one for people coming out of prison, and that in fact what I was finding was very representative. But I didn't know that, so I just had to sort of take a deep gulp and just say, let me keep filming. I don't want to make a film that says never hire anybody who's had prison. That's not what I set out to do. But if there are problems that are associated with hiring people who are just out of prison, let me trust the story and keep filming. And I think in the end, that worked itself out. But that was sort of the terrifying moment, which was, oh my goodness, everyone, almost every character I'm following is shooting themselves in the foot in one way or another. What the hell am I doing here? What is this story I'm telling? And then it took care of itself. Because you just dig deeper and you just keep filming and you trust that the material will speak in a way.
Could I ask how the restaurant is doing?
Thriving.
Good.
Thriving. And by the way, such is the power of a nomination that now there's like, they were doing fine before. They were, when we finished. But now it's like 4 people stacked at the bar, every night. And like they're having a special Oscar night party. I mean, and Brandon is, he's like the biggest deal in Cleveland since LeBron James, possibly bigger.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
It is just astonishing, the power of this bare buttocked statue over there. It's just staggering.
Betty Davis's husband. She's, yeah. Well, that's great. Are you going to go to the house? No, you're going to be here. So, well, thank you. So, Traffic Stop, devastating film and powerful because of Brianne. Is that how you say her name, Brianne?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. How did you find her?
Well, there was a little clip of her getting tossed around by the Austin police that went viral shortly after her arrest. And we worked closely with HBO right away. We all felt this could be a story, depending on who she turned out to be in person. And she didn't jump at it. As I said, she was really suffering. She, for a year, basically stayed under her covers and couldn't teach. Then it was sort of a slow emergence, and she took this as an opportunity to, in a sense, turn something good out of a terrible situation where she felt, if you see the film, it really suggests that her feeling of being oppressed stemmed from childhood, which makes sense. And so racism is just a theme throughout the film that culminates in this collision with the police. And so that's, we met with her and we had to sort of suss each other out and see if it just felt right. What we didn't expect, and which is really a uplifting part of the film, is that she's an incredible teacher. She's the teacher I wish I had, the 2nd grade teacher that's extraordinary. And she's a dancer, and I had to cut out the singing because she's too frigging good at everything. So that would be too much. So, if it happens to her, she had a clean record, then I'm hoping that the film will help a general audience realize it could happen to anybody. If you don't look right, according to, primarily white law enforcement. It's a very scary situation, which much of the population, myself included, is fairly, can be quite oblivious to. So I'm hoping we can, put ourselves a little bit in Brianne's shoes. Yes. She lived to tell the story, and I'm happy to say, the film process was very therapeutic for her. She will have a gown on Sunday night.
but it wasn't.
Yeah.
But it wasn't clear when we went down, much as we loved her and thought she was charming, and finding out she had no criminal background and was this wonderful teacher, was great. But when we turned the camera on her, it was really a fascinating experience because she just started crying, and I don't mean crying a little bit, but crying buckets, and for the whole interview. And it's one thing if you have a moment when someone breaks down in an interview, it can be really powerful. But she cried the whole time, and so we came back from this first shoot going, like, she's great, but we can't use any of this. She's crying all the time, and so we eventually came back, and you haven't seen the interview. There's not much interview material of this little clip we had, but she's wonderful and poised and self-reflective. And I later learned, only 8 months later, from her boyfriend, that this was a pivotal moment for her to be interviewed by us. Apparently, she had really never spoken about this in depth before. And so the first interview we did, we joke, cinema verite, right? We joke about cinema therapy. And this really was her unburdening herself. But so when we first went down, it was by no means clear that we had a film, because we just didn't know she could actually talk about it. And even now, it's still a little tough for her. So.
Yeah. Well, what I love juxtaposing the dash cam video with her life and you see what a great teacher she is, and just such a wonderful, vibrant human being. So it's interesting to learn that it took a while to really capture that, but you did. And she's coming on Sunday. She's not here tonight, is she?
She's coming on Sunday. She's thrilled. She's going to be on the red carpet. She's gorgeous.
I met her at the luncheon, and yeah, she was fabulous.
No, but intercutting really was the heart. One of the beauties of making a short film is it forces you to be almost a little haiku about it, to be more poetic, because you don't have the cinematic real estate to tell every little detail. And we did all these hard cuts between the dash cam footage and then the beauty of her private life. And it was that, it's what cinema can do sometimes, those hard slam cuts that force you to feel the juxtaposition between two things. And it, I hope brought out and brings home the kind of violence that it did to her.
Yeah, it was very effective, very powerful, as were all your films. So thank you all. Give everybody a big round of applause. And I'm going to invite Roger up, and musical chairs. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Your films here?
You're in for a treat. You're about to see the clips for the nominated features.
Abacus, Small Enough to Jail. Steve James, director. Mark Bitton, producer. Julie Goldman, producer.
And it's a humiliation. It's a humiliation for me.
And that's where I saw incompetence combined with arrogance. My deputy bureau chief, he's always so inspirational, and he would always refer to the inscriptions outside 100 Center Street about having faith in justice. But I don't believe that anymore. I decided to leave the DA's office.
It really angered the Chinese community, but so what? They're not going to decide an election for Vance.
That's it. You've done that many times? My whole life.
This is the association where my great-grandfather was, my grandfather, my dad. Back in the days with the Exclusion Act, people do not have rights. This is where they would all come. Family associations like this one are the only place where they felt welcome. Like Mr. Song, what drives me is that sense of community. Hey, 幾號呀？好嘅，冇見好叫。
學生咗咪訓練。
係咪嚟咗？
又肥咗又靚堆堆。
係啊，咁客氣。點啊？去邊度啊？唔識。行街。誒，早晨，點啊？去邊度啊？ This case is about an attack on our community. We're easy prey. I think that's what's going on. People have reason to be fearful of authority or what can happen to them. You know, the retribution, the years of oppression that happened from the street vendors, from the small businesses, from people just writing tickets because they can.
佢而家和少少嘅 festival 喺度受成熱踢滿落佢上邊路。咪啦，我叫佢搖到啊搖呀，我做嚟做得個做字啊，你都唔係硬聲，得個做字嘅。咁佢抄你咁樣就係。佢話我個 festival 咯。就話你嗰個位。係嗰個位啦。咁你嗰個警車泊咗喺嗰度 sidewalk 就冇事。佢冇事。你嗰一寸。咁啊，我哋有事，我哋有，佢哋大細，我哋係咁樣，我。少啲嘅 scale 又阻住。要打咗人哋個房，打咗佢背脊，佢翻嚟，佢告你翻嚟咯。你打咗人哋嘅嘢嘅喎，嗰個人咧消費者點兜條路啊？你叫佢。It's more than just Abacus Savings Bank being clear. It's about exonerating our entire community, no matter what we do. Be it the little guy selling vegetables or a bank that's doing business. I told Mr. Song, I'm glad they pick on you because you're a fighter.
Cyrus Vance just felt this is easier to attack, especially it's a family bank. But he doesn't realize Tom is not easy to be pushed around. And my girls, they're tough, smart, capable women, so courageous.
Although this is David versus Goliath, David, being Abacus Federal Savings Bank, has a slingshot. And that is, you know, their whole family of lawyers.
I was going to be able to fight this. They're almost gleeful. They're like, we're going to have our day in court now. We're actually going to be able to show that they were wrong.
They made a decision that they were not going to plead guilty to something that they didn't feel the bank was guilty of. That is a courageous choice, and it's an expensive choice. The DA's office has hundreds of lawyers and took 5 years to do their grand jury investigations, and it is a daunting task to fight the government.
Faces, Places. Agnes Varda, writer-director. J.R., writer-director. Rosalie Varda, producer.
Alors, notre projet, c'est de faire vos 3 portraits.
Et on va les coller sur des grands containers.
Avec plaisir, Agnès.
Un visage, c'est beau. Mais pour moi, une femme debout, c'est bien.
Ouais, c'est maintenant. Vous pouvez enlever votre petit gilet. Il y a ces messieurs qui travaillent ici au vestiaire qui...
Mais attends.
La tête un poil plus basse. Ouais, voilà. Attention, regard, œil ouvert.
Mais garde ton foulard, c'est très joli. Tiens-le à 2 mains pour voir. Là.
Les jambes un poil là comme ça, les jambes c'est parfait. Tu me regardes.
Oui, tes yeux, ils rient là, c'est bien. Souris que avec les yeux. L'idée, c'est que vous soyez comme 3 grandes statues, 3 totems, comme ça, qui rentrent dans ce monde d'hommes et qui s'installent.
Être à l'honneur, attends, encore une fois.
Des femmes totems, oui, mais audacieuses aussi.
Prêtes à se poser à l'intérieur de leur propre cœur.
Ah, qu'est-ce que c'est bien d'être ici. Un sentiment de liberté. Je suis trop contente d'être là-haut. C'est calme. C'est grand.
J'aime pas être seule, j'aime pas être en hauteur, j'aime pas être seule. Et là, c'est tout réuni, là. Donc, je suis pas rassurée.
J'ai l'impression de dominer, là. C'est bien, ça fait plaisir. On sent grande, là, je suis grande, je suis forte.
Je pense que ça va amener des curieux.
Dans le milieu de Caire, ça discute.
On s'est demandé qui étaient ces femmes. Donc on a expliqué en fait que c'était les nôtres, du coup le projet et tout ça. Ah bah, je pense que ça dépasse la fierté, quoi, en fait. C'est toute cette implication, enfin voilà, c'est toujours plus. Donc on avance par rapport à des clichés qui existent.
Elles sont enfermées, mais pas pour longtemps.
Je ne les vois pas bien parce qu'elles sont très loin, mais je vois que ce sont des femmes oiseaux.
Icarus, Brian Fogel, writer, director, producer, Dan Kogan, producer.
You know, we're 84 days away to the Summer Games in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil.
Until now, there's only really been hard evidence about athletics, but this is now pointing the finger at a whole range of sports.
As you guys all know, there's a Department of Justice investigation going. So Gregory's been advised by his lawyers he should not be here for security reasons. I worked with Gregory over about 6 months to compile a record of what happened in Russia. This is the spreadsheet of every single athlete that was on the state-mandated protocol, what every single athlete was taking in London, including their sample numbers in collection. When Christiane goes back and tests these samples correctly, she will basically find them all positive. And we have all their protocols before the London Games. We have the same for Beijing. And this outlines how Russia was collecting thousands and thousands of clean samples for swabbing.
No, this we saw, but we want to ask questions as well as how it was done, understanding.
So sodium chloride is added to the sample to increase specific gravity. So many of these samples are going to have 100 times the sodium content that should be in somebody's urine.
Let me make sure I understand. They were taking the bee to be open secretly?
Yes.
You said it was removed after the Paralympic Games. Does it mean that it happened also for the Paralympic?
No, it means, yes. Both the Olympic and the Paralympic Games, they swapped urine. Vancouver was really the impetus for the urine swapping operation. They only won a handful of medals, and to see to it that that didn't happen again at Sochi.
We find that in terms of time sensitive, London is more sensitive in the sense that these athletes are going to the next Rio Games, not the winter.
This is Sochi, this is London, this is Beijing. This goes all the way back to 1968. There never was anti-doping in Russia, period, ever.
Across all summer sports?
Every sport.
And he's sorry?
Who's that?
Gregory?
I don't want to get into that. I don't want
Do
Gregory.
you think that as a scientist I am happy to have been in Sochi and to everything we gave credibility to the lab? Do you think that I feel good today? Do you think that the athletes who were cheated feel good?
You know, and as angry as you guys might be, I think the one thing, Gregory risked his life and is risking his life to do this. He left his wife behind, he left his children behind, he left all of his belongings behind, all of his financial security behind. We're here to get everything out.
Okay.
Dear Mr. Fogel and Dr. Rodchenkov, the IOC has full confidence in the authority of Professor Richard McLaren and respects his judgment to ensure a comprehensive inquiry. We will act swiftly to take the necessary measures. Sincerely yours, Thomas Bach, President.
Transferring you to Richard McLaren. You speak of them as being orders. Are they actually orders? Like Nagornov is ordering Gregory or ordering the lab? It doesn't matter.
Yes, Nagornov is ordering Gregory. There's emails like explicitly about soccer players. There's emails explicitly of of weightlifters, and that essentially were of rowers, of swimmers, where Gregory had found the positive.
They are concerned about it. They find the right profile in the bank and pick that one out of the bank, and they run the analysis on that one.
You got it.
I see. If this all can be proved, it's quite mind-blowing. The sooner I have it, the better.
Okay.
It's incredibly important to a hell of a lot of people around the world.
Last Men in Aleppo, Firas Fayyad, director, Karim Abid, producer, Søren Steen Jespersen, producer.
أنا بطلع كويس أقول له تبعتون تركيا بهذا صراحة.
طيب يا أخوي تحسب حساب مثلا أنت بعتهم مثلا وأنت تحاصرتهم وهن تحاصروا هنيك يعني أضبط يعني تبعويا.
يعني ما في محل تبعتون عليه. تركيا شفت شلون ايش عم يصير فيهم عم شوف قدامتنا انا شفتها اليمين ايش عم تسوي فينا. برجع بقول يعني ايش ما هيك فكرت بالشغله برجع بقول لا خليهم قدام عيوني. خليهم قدام عيوني صراحه يموتوا قدام عيوني قلبي برتاح وبطمن لاني اذا هن بعاد عني واذا وحده منهم صار لها شيء راح ابكي دم بصراحه يعني. راح ابكي دم عليهم.
وزوجتها
ايش به؟
انه ما تضغط عليك انه تترك كذا.
هلا هي عم تضغط علي لا ما تضغط علي. بتعرفني يعني بس يعني اصمم على شغلي ما تحكي بالموضوع طول. والله يا ابو يوسف انا بالنسبه لوضعي يعني بالبيت اذا ما طلعت انا ما بطلع مني وانا ما بحسن اطلع مع حدا.
السبب؟
ما بحسن اطلع مع حدا يا حجي. هي مدينتي خلقت وربيت فيها اتركها لمين؟ للغريب؟ ما انا اتركها.
Strong Island, Yance Ford, director-producer, Jocelyn Barnes, producer.
What flashed into my mind just now was the room that we were waiting in. The ADA came in and called me in to testify. I walk in, I sit down, I look around the room. I see nobody who looks like me. No person of color. They were sitting in an area like a theater, elevated seats. There must have been 20-something people there. One person was reading a book, another lady was reading a magazine. There was a conversation going on. My feelings were, when I sat in that chair, was, they don't care about what I have to say. They really don't. They weren't paying attention. They weren't. Okay? And I became very angry with myself because at one point I began to cry. And I hated that moment because I felt that, you know, they were going to say, here is another Black woman who didn't do her job with her child, and now she wants us to make somebody pay. That's how I felt. When your father came back, he said to me, don't expect anything, because it ain't gonna happen.
And how did you find out what they had decided?
They came here.
Who came here?
One ADA and a detective.
And what did they tell you?
They didn't indict. They returned no true bill.
That was it?
I'm sorry.
What happened after that?
I opened the door and said, thank you for coming. And I will be very honest with you. When that door closed, I collapsed.
Please welcome to the stage the filmmaking teams of the documentary features. It's sobering watching those clips. So let's just go down the line so we know who everyone is, and say your name and what you did on your film.
Steve James, director, Abacus.
Mark Mitten, producer, Abacus.
Julie Goldman, producer, Abacus.
Agnès Varda, co-director of First Expressive.
Brian Fogel, director, Icarus.
Dan Kogan, producer, Icarus.
Firas Fayyad, director of Last Man in Aleppo.
I'm Søren Sten Jespersen. I'm one of the producers of Last Man in Aleppo.
I'm Yancey Ford, director of Strong Island.
And Jocelyn Barnes, producer of Strong Island.
Great. Well, Steve, you're up first. So, this is a film about, injustice, but it's also a film about really strong women. And the sung women, I think they're here tonight.
Yes, they are.
When you
Come on.
stand up,
You're at Mrs. High.
the whole family.
Father, too.
When you met these ladies, did you know you hit documentary gold?
Yes. I mean, when we went to first film, we found out very quickly that we were not going to be able to film in the courtroom. We found out that we weren't going to be able to film the prosecution's folks at all, their side of it. We even found out we weren't going to be able to film the Sung's defense lawyers, which really shocked us because defense lawyers want to be stars of movies generally, but not these guys. So we basically only had access, in quotes, to the Sung family outside the courtroom, but they were so compelling, principled, courageous, funny, that it was like, that's the center of our movie anyway.
Mrs. Sung should do stand-up.
Oh, for sure.
She is so funny.
Yes. The best comic timing of any subject I've been involved with.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mark, you found this story. Tell me how that came about, and how did you sort of bring it to Steve?
It was an unsung story.
He should not do stand-up.
Yeah, you should not do stand-up.
I need lessons from Mrs. Sung, what can I say? I'd known the Sungs for almost a decade, and they revealed to me that they were going to be indicted for mortgage fraud. And I was both perplexed and then outraged when I found out that they were the only bank that was going to be indicted for mortgage fraud as part of the 2008 financial crisis. And what was even more shocking was that it really was an unsung story because the mainstream media had not picked up on it. The Chinese American press covered it every day, but none of the mainstream press did. So at that point, I felt that it was a story that certainly needed to be told because it was a cautionary tale. And it's about the daughters, the strong daughters, protecting the legacy of their father. So I reached out to...
He's also here, Mr.
Yes,
Sung.
yes, Mr. Sung's here.
Sorry, Mr. Sung.
So I reached out to Steve, and Steve and I had worked together on Life Itself, and I said, I think there's something here, but I want your opinion. And as he already said, he came to New York, and after a few days, he said, there's definitely something here.
So you guys are based in Chicago, you know, famous sort of Chicago filmmakers, and most of your stories take place in Chicago. But you worked with Julie in New York, and how did that work, Julie? How did that relationship work?
And they deigned to come to New York to make a film, which was quite shocking. Only the songs could draw them there.
No, and to work with you.
So what happened is that we really kind of brought the team in that would be doing the day-to-day filming, and you guys really came back and forth quite a bit to film, but we had on the ground, like if we needed to capture something, we had our DP, Tom Bergman, who you know well, and our field producer, Sean Lioness, our AP. So that's like our, you know, we're based in Brooklyn. It was our team at Motto that was making sure that if anything emergent happened, we would be capturing it or start to capture it before you could get there, especially when there's a trial and there's a verdict and you're, you know, kind of on tenterhooks. So how long is this going to take? And so we worked that way through production.
And yes, so when we talked at the Governor's Awards, she received the Governor's Award, a Lifetime Achievement Governor's Award this year. I talked to you and you said, I don't think I'm gonna get nominated. There's so many more important films, and I told you you were definitely gonna be nominated because you made such a special, heartfelt film that really touches people's hearts, and you give voice in this film to people who don't have a voice, to the workers, to farmers. Tell me how you came to JR and his work, and why did you decide, you know, you could do whatever you want, but why did you decide to work with JR?
Well, JR has already worked in a direction that I like. You know, he had a project called Inside Out, he went with his magical truck to many places and have people, you know, paste their own images together, creating links with images, make them big. So it's exactly what I like to do as a documentarist. So when my daughter said, how come you don't know each other? I said, I don't know. So she said, let's meet. We met, and the day after we decided to do something, because it was obvious that our ideas about what we can do with people, how we can represent them, are in the same direction. And then we decided to do the tour in France, and meet people, as you notice, simple people with no power, so that we could just make you, audience, meet these people. We felt we were go-between, but also we got along very well. We enjoyed our relationship. It became slightly a part of the documentary, but mostly it's the people we involve. You see in the sequence you show here, we got these doc workers to be involved in the project, not only question and answer. They like the project and they help us doing all the work that we couldn't do with the containers. It's like we wanted people not only to enter in the documentary, but to be part of the desire of creation, imagination, make things be slightly different. And Jehan and I'm sorry he's not here, but he's not here.
Where is he?
But we work together and we agree totally that, especially I'm a feminist, so I got them to work on making the women be bigger than usual. But it is true that it's, you know, they were not allowed to come to that part of the harbor. So not only we make them come, but we made them big. And it became, as he said, which I love the most, is we pushed a little the préjugé and the cliché. That's what is good. When a film, a documentary, the meeting, what we said, what we discussed, make people change slightly the same way we change, and we learn about what we film.
Yeah. So where is JR? He's at the César Awards. Where's JR?
Gérard is in Paris, and he couldn't come. He couldn't come. He's coming in 2 days. And as you know, when I'm not with him, he has a little photo of me on a board.
A little photo. He has a life-size cutout that he bought to the nominees' lunch and carried that. That was such a hit.
Because, you know, it's beautiful what's happening. But for us, being invited in Oscarland is a trip, you know, and we enjoy it more than I'm not in the competition feeling at all. We are enjoying the fact.
So you're having fun. Great. That's the way it should be. So, Brian, you used to be a stand-up comedian. You have a background in theater. Documentaries aren't normally very funny. How did you translate those skills to making documentaries?
First of all, what an amazing honor to be up here with all of you, and so many of my incredible film team are here in the audience tonight that I couldn't be here without. And I just wanted to say that before I answered your question. You know, I guess I come from a creative background and a background of how to tell a story, and also kind of that when I set my mind to something, I just push and push until I see it through. And for this, you know, when I started out, I couldn't have imagined where it was going to go to, but once I was in it, I never saw a way out of it. I just kept going and going and going.
Much as we would have liked one sometimes.
Yeah. And so, you know, I think, you know, if I go way back, I mean, I was doing stand-up comedy 20 years ago, but, you know, when you're doing stand-up comedy, you get up there and the joke bombs, and then you just got to keep going. And sometimes it gets really bad and you just want to get off stage, and you're like, okay, I'm going to push through. And that was my experience through life. And as I set out to make this film, I had raised a little bit of money, and I wasn't going to let myself down, and I didn't want to let this friend of mine who had invested in me down. And then Dan Kogan and Impact Partners came into it, and I didn't want to let them down. And then I didn't want to let Gregory Rodchenkov down. So through it all, it just became this kind of epic journey of 3.5 years of wanting to see to it that Gregory and this story that he was driving in his desire to bring forward this truth, and my team that had surrounded this project, that were all working so hard to protect Gregory, to do everything that we could so that this truth could come forward. And through these two elements, and through having an incredible creative team, we persevered, and here we are.
Tell us where Gregory is now, and well, I guess you can't tell us where Gregory is, but tell us how he's doing and give us an update.
I was planning to bring a cutout of Gregory to the Oscar nominee lunch, and then JR upstaged me.
And we thought the bare-chested version might be too much.
But you know, things are very serious for Gregory. I don't know where he is. I haven't been able to speak or have contact with him for a very long time. He's in protective custody of the United States. He's in an unknown location. He's under 24-hour protection. And Putin has formally asked the United States to extradite him. There are criminal charges that he would spend his life in jail or face execution in Russia. And he is considered by most authorities to be the single biggest enemy of the Russian state, and is being hunted. So it's incredibly serious, and he's been away from his family for 2 years. I don't see an end in sight. And the more tragic thing about it is that we're learning in this world, in this society, that telling the truth doesn't necessarily set you free. And not only does it not set you free, in the case of Gregory, he's going to have a mark on his back for the rest of his life. And we learned yesterday that the Olympics have lifted this ban on Russia, and yet they never even punished them to begin with. The ban was all bullshit. They had allowed 160 Russian athletes into the games. 2 of them were caught for doping. Russia's never even confessed to any of this, regardless of what is in the film, and then 2 investigations afterwards proven that everything is true. And it makes you kind of wonder, what is the point in being so brave to tell the truth when the outcome is this? And me standing on this stage, or sitting on this stage, is just an honor to Gregory, and being able to shine a spotlight on something that is incredibly serious and affecting our democracy and democracies around the world.
Thanks. A brave man, very brave man for what he's done. Dan, you're normally an EP. Many films. I mean, too many to count that you've EP'd. Why did you sort of, decide to jump in and produce this film? What was different about this film?
Somebody had to. We came into this film when Brian was making a film about him doping himself. And I love that idea because it was sneaky, it was muckraking. I love the idea of watching someone, we hear about doping in sports all the time, but we never see it because it's supposed to be secret. And so I love the idea of actually be able to watch someone do this and see the effects on them, and then see if they could actually get through the system looking clean. And I thought it was a brilliant idea that Brian had, and I was excited about doing it. And so we at Impact Partners went ahead and did it. And then when things changed, when Gregory was outed, this guy who was helping him dope, who was outed as the center of the Russian doping conspiracy, and he called Brian up and said, I need to come to the LA now. I need to escape. Everything changed. And all of a sudden, we were dealing not just with the making of a film, but with criminal lawyers, with immigration lawyers, with finding him security, with keeping the production secure from Russian hacking. And so we had a whole set of challenges that you're not normally dealing with a film, and it was Brian and I doing it. And so I really didn't have a choice. I just threw myself in full time to producing it with him, and that's how we did it for the next 2 years.
And you're in the film.
I am strangely in the film, and if you want to see an accurate picture of a miserable producer, watch the movie. There's a moment where we're meeting with a lawyer of his who was not very good, and we're listening to the terrible choices we have to choose among, and I just could not look more miserable, and it's an accurate portrayal.
I'm preparing a set of outtakes called Dan Kogan, Miserable Producer.
Extras. First, you made a just heartbreaking, powerful, beautiful, in its artistry and in the way you depict such suffering, is just astounding. And you yourself went to prison and were tortured. And I guess my question to you is, how do you balance telling your need to tell the story with the danger that you're in, because you put yourself in such a danger to make this film?
Thank you for being here with this incredible films. I love your film. We have the same fighting. Actually, when you saw the truth and you know this is the truth, if you put it in 24 frames, it's gonna change. That's what I believe. That's how I grow up. I grow up in environment. If you say no, you're gonna go to the jail or you're gonna killed. And for us in Syria, the films is is art. It's not a business. It's a way for freedom of expressions, way for changing, way for saying no in many layers way. And when we saw the war, like, and involving different parties in Syria, we couldn't do anything. So we don't have anything to do to fight or to protect ourselves or protect the truth that we saw or the witnesses and evidence. And I feel like my duty, my responsibility to do something change in my countries with my team of cinematographer, that we just put the camera and witnesses and bring these pictures in front of the people to involve them, engagement in what's going on, because the politicians didn't do anything for 7 years. It's a shame, a big shame. That means you have to motivate the people who have the power of the speech, the power of their voices to change the society around them. And it's not also about us. About this is volunteer who is in the front line. They have their finger, their hand to do something, and I believe in the art as a way like to change the society, and that's what we did. And when we screen this film, we change a lot of mind. We change people coming to us to say like, we love Syrians. We never thought the Syrian like this. It's changing the way of thinking about the Syrian, changing the way of thinking about the society, changing the way about also the truth that told by the Russians or by Assad regime, the propaganda, and we just bringing that with the evidence, without paperwork that the Russian they do through the social media or through different way. We bring it in the visuals and put it in front of the people and bring the people to be with us in these battles. And yeah, we can win. Yeah.
Amazing. What has been I have another question for you. What has been the reaction of the Russian government and the Syrian government since you got nominated for an Oscar?
They were very happy. Yeah. The Russian government, it's not work directly to me because they know I'm a Syrian citizen and I have a Syrian passport. So they use the Syrian regime to put pressure over us, and they run their media through the Syrian regime or their media and to destroy the trust between us and between the peoples. Like they accuse us as like I'm a tourism director here. Like watch out. Like maybe I put any explosion bomb under the chairs like this way. And this is attack. It's kept going through like this is. Which is called the Russian Electronic Army and the Syrian regime Electronic Army. There is in St. Petersburg and there is in Damascus. And they run there is a propaganda machine through destroy the films, bringing different picture and put it next to each other. Every comment, even the journalists that write about the films, they just like publish on over that. I mean, many of the journalists said, "Whoa, it's out of us. We are just a review and a film writers why we should be in these battles." And I feel like in a way like I'm guilty in this is, and I found it's bigger than me as a filmmaker who is trying to bring evidence about war crimes and about people be killed and about what I've been witnesses. And I find in myself in bigger battle than I can't handle it because I'm small enough to jail.
But you're a big artist.
Yes. Soren, there is a producer who's on your team who's not here. Can you just tell us what his status is and why he's not here?
Yeah, Karim Abid, the Syrian producer of the film from Aleppo Media Center, he just got his visa yesterday. Yeah. So he will be arriving tomorrow evening.
Hopefully, if
Yeah,
the
hopefully if
ban from the immigration, it's moved from Department of State Department to immigration now.
Yeah, but we cross our fingers and hope for the best.
Not optimistic.
I'm always optimistic.
You are Danish, I'm Syrian.
How do you protect these guys? You, as the producer, they're in grave danger, and I don't know if you were on the ground there, but how do you protect these guys?
It's a very difficult question. It's a very difficult question because I'm from Denmark, and my role in the film has been to get finance and pave the way for the film, and it's sometimes very difficult to get into these very complex things that are going on politically and media-wise with all these guys. But of course, we talk and we communicate, and I try to understand what is going on, and I try to understand what we can do to help them.
Yeah. Thank you. Yancy.
Oh no.
So, this has been a long journey for you, making this film, many years. And so...
Too many.
How many?
Too many.
Too many. Tell me how the film changed over that journey, and how you ended up with this very intimate and powerful portrait of your family and yourself.
Yeah.
And what was that journey?
You know, at the beginning of the process of making Strong Island, I didn't want myself in the film. I didn't want any white people in the film. I didn't want my sister in the film. I had all of these rules about who was and wasn't going to be allowed, into the space to tell the story. And I also was asking the question of what happened, right? And the question of what happened is really easily arrived at. It's a historical what. A white person killed a black person. That black person happened to be my brother, and he claimed to have done so in self-defense. And as is the course of proceedings in this country, a grand jury declined to indict him, which meant that he didn't stand trial at all. It's not guilty or innocent. It's no crime has been committed here. And that person went home to his life, and my family went back into our community, did what they could to try to advocate for justice and agitate for justice. After the no tribunal came back, we, in 1992, my parents exhausted all of their resources, and it was just sort of over. And then what happened after that was the aftermath of this, lack of due process, of this lack of the ability to hold anyone accountable for my death, for my brother's death, rather, other than my brother. So the film really turned, from what happened to why did it happen and what happened afterward. The process of making the film involving other people was about 10 years. The process of making the film, personally, and sort of getting myself to the point of shooting my first, on a P2 camera with shitty sound, and the doors open, and my mom at the kitchen table really framed poorly and over my shoulder. That was more than 10 years. But what I eventually got to was a different line of inquiry. A line of inquiry that broadened the story out from one that was about my family to one that was about a familiar sequence of events that happened to particular people in the United States, and my family being just the vehicle through which we explore this narrative of racialized fear and quote-unquote justifiable homicide.
Jocelyn, I couldn't think of a more perfect person to come in and help Yancy through this process. You are known for working with filmmakers around the world, filmmakers of color, and telling difficult stories. How did you help shape this story?
Yancy invited me into the film, firstly as a friend. I think you had been working on the film really 4 years, and 2 years really thinking it through and researching it before that. But and then I came on as an executive producer to help with the financing when you ran into financial trouble. And then ultimately, Yancy asked me to take over the production. And we talked a lot about the importance of firstly removing the burden of producing from Yancy, because there was so much pressure and it was already so difficult to carry this story for such a long time. But then, over the course of talking with Yancy about the project, I realized that the film that he was making was not actually the film that he wanted. And that was a scary moment, to be at a place where you've been making a film for 4 years, your financing is starting to go, and you have an edit after hundreds and hundreds of hours of shooting. You have an edit that you really aren't happy with. And we discussed that, that the film was really sitting in the house of grief, and that there was nowhere to go from that grief. And as compelling as Yancy's mother is, Barbara is so compelling. You could watch Barbara Ford for days and never get tired of watching Barbara Ford. But the spine of the story had to change if we were going to find a way through grief into something deeper. And at the time, Yancy's editor was moving on to another project, and I had been working in Denmark with Signe Sorensen, the co-producer, who's actually here tonight. And we talked about an editor named Jonas Billeskov Jensen, who's also here tonight, who's a great editor. And we were very fortunate that he was available. And so we moved the edit from the US, where killings were happening, every few days. And we moved to Denmark. And Yancy was there for 9 months. I was there off and on during that time for maybe, a total of months. And we all together as a team, led by Yancy, working with Jonas, we all together as a team, thought through this investigation, thought through the questions, and changed the questions that you wanted to ask, and really started to get at this idea of fear. Reasonable fear is what underpins self-defense cases. And who gets to decide reasonable fear? The question that you pose in the film, what is the distance of reasonable fear? And then really flipping that question to look at whose fear is actually reasonable in America. If you were to do a body count, historically, the weight of that question is enormously significant. And that whole process, I think, was a collaborative effort, and I think you wouldn't have come to it if you hadn't come through all those years of working on the film. Yep. And sometimes a film takes as long as it needs to take. But it was a great process, and I think we together tried to bring out the best in the creative team. We were aided by great composers, great sound mixers, and Alan Jacobson, our DP, is here tonight, and Alan, Jonas, Sina, all of whom are here, thank you for all that you contributed.
Thank you. We're almost out of time, so I'm going to do what I'm calling a Oscar lightning round. So, because, last year I was honored enough to sit on this stage, and the journey that you take from nomination to Sunday is it's exciting, but it's also an exhausting and harrowing one. So I just want to talk to each of you about your experiences, but I'm gonna start with you, Julie, because last year we were sitting on the stage, and then a few days later we were in a spa, and after this sort of long ride,
we haven't gotten any spas.
Oh yeah, you haven't gotten any spas.
Rage
After this long ride, we're sitting there in the spa. We were wiped out. We were exhausted. And Julie turns to me and she said, "I never want to do this again."
Really?
You never told us that.
Here you are, the second consecutive year, and the only other person to be nominated in documentary, a feature for 2 years in a row, was Walt Disney. Congratulations. Yeah. Walt made docs. Steve.
There's no question in that for her.
No, nothing.
So waiting about the spa. That's our question.
Go ahead. Comment. Quick.
No, I mean, are you talking about when we were in Miami?
Yeah.
There was more than one?
I was going to say.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't here. Don't worry about it. It was actually we can all try to go screen at that festival, which has we snuck into the spa, which they didn't want to let us into, and it was empty because it had just opened. And yes, it was like that moment of this was. It is such a strange and surreal thing to do this, because the truth is, in this community, we all really we grow to care and love each other's films, and we support each other, and so there's this kind of wonderful part of the experience that's unlike anything else, but it's also incredibly rigorous and sometimes feels like the antithesis to what you should be doing when you're in the documentary world. It's an interesting combination.
Steve, this is your first nomination after many snubs, and how
nominated for editing.
I know you were nominated for editing, but your first nomination as a director. Tell me how that feels.
Well, I'm hoping to crush all these people here. No, that's not true at all. It feels great. I'm trying to get a stand-up career. It feels great. You know, I feel like I've had plenty of good fortune over the years as a filmmaker, and this was not something that happened. But now that it's happened, it's very sweet. It's wonderful. It's been great to sort of share this ride with these two folks, and it's also been amazing to share it with the Sung family, because they're sick of us by now. But this has been a long, sweet ride with them, and we couldn't do it with better people.
And Mark, you're responsible for Steve's first nomination.
I take complete credit. No, I think, look, it was important to think about how this film could possibly get Steve a nomination. And you know, I've never really said this in public, and Vera's here, and she knows. I said when we started to make the film that I think that there is actually a shot that we would be nominated for the Academy Award.
Wow.
So that's it may be ballsy, but that was, I really believed in the story. I believed in the songs, and here we are.
Here you are. To the great. So, you are 89, and you are the oldest. I know I shouldn't give a woman's age, but it's well documented. And you are the oldest nominee in history.
I recently learned that James Ivory, who is nominated as screenplay, is 2 weeks younger than me.
You're still the oldest. How does that feel? How does it feel to be the oldest?
We are a pair of oldies.
You what?
Did I say it right?
Yeah, a pair of oldies. Yes.
The two oldest. And so what?
Brian, If you win the Oscar, tell me what joke you're going to say on stage.
That is a setup. Yeah, if I we and my team were to win the Oscar, that would be just an astounding moment for Gregory, and I couldn't be more honored to really accept that award on his behalf. So, but yeah. I don't think I'll be telling any jokes. I think I'll be telling the world to wake up to what is going on in our country, and for any of those who believe that Russia is not interfering in our democratic process, I'm going to urge them to watch Icarus.
Dan, you're married to a famous documentary filmmaker, Liz Garbus. Did you ever in your wildest dreams think that you could be the first one to bring home an Oscar? And what's that going to be like?
I don't know how to answer that question. The easiest answer is no. Definitely not. You know, I think my wife is the best filmmaker in the world, and I've learned an enormous amount from her, from not just about filmmaking, but particularly in producing, about learning what a great filmmaker needs to succeed, learning about the kind of support they need to get to the best place they can be with their film. And so I think I benefited enormously from what a great storyteller she is and what a great partner she is, because I've learned how to support that person, and hopefully I've been able to do that for Brian. I'm able to do that for other filmmakers. So that's what I've realized in this process. And I'm happy to say she's been nominated twice, and I wish her many more. So she's winning as far as I'm concerned.
Ferris, tell me what was your reaction when you heard you were nominated? Tell me that story, because I've read it. Tell them.
Yeah, I was in Davos, where all this is superpower decision maker, and I was the only one Syrian. Normally, Bashar al-Assad go there, and his brother, sister, family, like, because Syria is a farm of him. So, and I was like feeling like jet lag and mixing in the time, and in almost in the bed, and I want to sleep because I'm very tired, and Trump coming and they closing the road, and I'm very upset because there was before days like was Macron or decision makers, and yeah, and I get a call from the phone, the hotel phones, and a friend of mine told me like, why you didn't answer on your mobile phone? I said like, I'm tired, I'm gonna sleep. I told me like, you get nominated, just look to you. He didn't say like that, he said, I said, yeah, oh, okay, don't joke about this. He said like, no, I'm not joking, just take this film and make Trump now to watch it. And I was just like, my mobile phone is because there is 1,000 of pictures, so stuck with a lot of this is alert. A lot of people, especially Syrian, was like something so beautiful, like when you see like the Syrian celebrate because this is moment, because all of this sad, death, and we just reading death on our iPhones and our social media. So I opened my computer, I watched that, all of that. I saw Abacus, Faces, Places, Icarus. The last minute was very difficult, and yeah, I mean, crying from inside without voice. It was, yeah, it's very hard. I don't know. I just like feeling like your blood, like a justice moving in your body, and how you feel you're gonna. When I was tortured in the prisons, I couldn't say no. I don't like Assad, and I can't say any one of that question that asking me, and I can't say any words. And I feel like I can say a lot in this place with this films, not just for me as a first Syrian director, but also about hundred. I'm not gonna say like thousand because the Russian will say thousand. Come on, okay, hundred of filmmaker, artists, Syrian and non-Syrian, trying to bring this truth to this platform, and most of them killed. And we are doing nothing. And I manage, I'm lucky, actually. That's what the feeling, yeah.
Soren, what is it going to mean for Syria, do you think, if anything, if this film wins an Oscar?
Oh, I think it's going to mean that there will be a lot more, even more attention than Firas already made, and I hope that all this attention will make some people think a little more about what is it like to be a human being in this situation, in a conflict, in a violent conflict. How do you deal with your dilemmas as a human being when the bombs are raining from the sky? And if we win, knock on something wooden, knock on this. I hope that even more people will get the chance to reflect a bit on that.
Stopping the war in Syria, at least, I mean, using the art to stop the war. Just imagine that this is film Stop the War. Yeah. It's big things.
Yancy, you're the first transgender nominee, and what does that mean? What is that going to mean to so many people? That's an incredible responsibility and incredible. So,
yeah, I seem to gravitate toward incredible responsibilities. Being the first openly transgender nominee is obviously it's a role that I am grateful to occupy. I certainly didn't have to be the first. I could have I share that honor this year with Daniela Vega, and all sorts of other nominees in the LGBTQ community, and I'm really proud about that. And I sort of think about it in two ways. I think about when I was young and watching the Oscars, right? And when I was sort of grappling with what it meant to have a gender identity, right? And I know that on Sunday when I'm not sure how many kids will be watching it, like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but when we walk the red carpet, it will mean something to kids, around the world, to see me and to have that little tag first trans nominee as a director, and that's great, and I'm glad for that. But for the adults in the world, right? I take that moment of this moment in history, and I use it to hook people's attention back onto the issue and turn it right back around. Because the kids need examples. The adults need to engage in these issues because we are the ones who have created this historical mess. We are the ones who have not yet reconciled with this historical mess in this country. So I will wear a pin that kids can see and point to and look and know that one day that quote unquote you'll be all right or it will be okay, but my attention will be on the conversation that has to happen between the adults that make policy in this country and the people who for far too long have lived with the illusion that our criminal justice system is equal for all, because it is not. So that moment will be special for me, but it's also a moment that I will use to focus like a laser beam on this thing that we have yet to reconcile. As Angela Davis said in San Francisco, since the aftermath of the Civil War, being at the first half of the 21st century, we are still grappling with the issues that we should have solved in the aftermath of slavery. So that's what the moment means for me. And it also, it means just being able to have the team here, right? To have our Danish counterparts here, to have our DP here, to have my partner here, to have Joss here. So many people spent so many years like helping this film, picking me up, propping me up, and keeping me going. That Sunday, no matter what happens, will feel like an opportunity for me to give the ultimate thank you to people who, I've been able to say thank you to, but I haven't been able to actually show that thank you on a grand world stage. And I'm just really grateful for the opportunity to do that.
Jocelyn, you get the last word. People often dismiss the Oscars as, fashion and clothes and frivolous, but what does it mean, and what will it mean to you to walk down that red carpet with Yancy, to stand there if you win? What does that mean to you and the work you've put into this film, and that you are representing this particular filmmaker sitting next to you?
Well, I think what he said, firstly. It's a strange thing to work on films that have such gravity and to be in such an incredibly difficult moment as a country, to be living with this administration and to be living in such tyrannical times, and to be then engaged in walking down a red carpet and having, a lot of people just say as their immediate reaction, "Who are you wearing?" It's a weird balance of things, and I think that it's the importance of our industry and maintaining the independence, retaining the final cut for artists, championing the community as a community and not being divided and not going through a process that actually further divides us and that becomes controlled by money, is really essential. So I would just say that in the larger context of this political moment, that we should really maintain that solidarity, and solidarity really isn't enough, but it's a really good starting point for each of us to recognize ourselves in each other. And I would just advocate, actually, that the Academy expand the documentary category. I think there should be an international documentary category. I think there should be an editor award and other awards, because documentary is incredibly important and has become ever more important. And so I'll just take this moment to advocate for that, because I know it makes everyone so damn uncomfortable. But as for walking down the red carpet with Mr. Yancey Ford, it has been a singular privilege to work with Yancey Ford and this entire team. And I thank you for inviting me to produce your film, and I thank Barbara Ford for guiding us the whole way. And I thank my partner, Anita, whose shoulders I'm standing on. And yeah, thanks.
Well, I know it's a cliche to say, but you're all winners. And you've all made extraordinary pieces of art that will live forever and that will inspire all of us forever. So congratulations, and thank you for the work you've done. And I can't wait to see you all out there on Sunday. So thank you. And thank you guys for coming.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you, Roger.